All right, so just to get started, because we have a couple of presentations today. My name's Annabel Lee Enriquez, and I'm a project specialist at the Getty Conservation Institute and a member of the Arches project team. And I'm a member of the Arches project team, and this is the first meeting of the Arches modeling user group. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, actually. You'll see that. Yep. So this is the first meeting, and today we'll start off with introductions, very, very brief, and then talk about what this user group is, essentially what it's for, and some of the logistics and the resources that the user group will have. And then we'll have the two presentations. The first presentation will be by me, and I'll be talking about how to get started with resource modeling in Arches. So just a very, very broad overview of how to get started with Arches resource modeling. And then my co-host today, George Bruseker, will be presenting on Arches data modeling and ontologies. So, and then after that, we'll have the Q&A and just a general group discussion to talk about modeling generally and to answer any questions you all might have on modeling. And so, sure on that. And so again, so just to start off with introductions, again, and really just what the purpose of this group is. So I've been involved in really kind of developing materials and organizing the Arches resource model working group, which is a group that I'll talk about in a little bit, for the last several years. And this is this user group is something that we've been talking about for a while now, which is essentially a group where we invite people, regardless, Arches community members, regardless of their experience level with modeling, to come and have a discussion, to share information and knowledge about creating resource models in Arches. And so this is really the kickoff for that. And we'll be finding our way and figuring out what works for the community as we move along. But this is really the start of it. And we're hoping that that the modeling conversation in the community will be more robust as we move along. So let's see. I was going to wait to see how many people there were to see if we did have any time. We did have time to do introductions, but what I'll say is that introductions are, they're optional. You don't have to introduce yourself, or if you feel more comfortable introducing yourself via the chat, that's fine too. But I'll open the floor and say that if you want to introduce yourself and talk about what you hope to get out of this group, please do so now. And any volunteers who might want to introduce themselves?
I'll go. It's
okay.
Dennis Fairlawn. I'm a member of the Arches technical team. I get to lead one of probably the primary application developers for the Arches platform. And my interest in this group is, I think, really very straightforward. I'm quite interested in hearing about real-world use cases for representing resources in Arches. So the idea of appropriately abstracting the real world into models in Arches is something I'm quite interested in, and I'd really love to hear how people are thinking about representing their data in the Arches platform.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you, Rob. That's it's a good suggestion. So if you want to introduce themselves, feel free to raise your hand in Zoom and I'll call on you. And And I'll just, okay, Joe, Kent.
Hi. I've only just started using Arches. I've just joined a project, the Congruent Engine project. So I've basically just come in to try and get a review of how it works together. It's taking me a while to get to grips with it.
It's understandable. Yes, absolutely. Like I said, this group is for any skill level, and we hope to be of use to you. Okay, I'll call on John Murphy.
Yeah, hello. So yeah, I work for the Historic Environment Division in Northern Ireland, and with a team called Flax and Teal, we've been implementing an Arches instance for the last 2 years now. And we've relied pretty heavily on the models that are built into Arches for HER, but I'm kind of keen to understand a bit more about how we could maybe go beyond that in cases where we might need to. Obviously the Arches for HER has been brilliant for us, but I feel like we're not taking full advantage of the abilities of Arches and the inherent benefits of it being built on CIDOC. So I'm keen to learn.
Great. All right, Rob Sanderson.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob Sanderson, Senior Director for Digital Cultural Heritage at Yale University. So we are in the process of spinning up Arches here to help with our LOCKSS knowledge graph. But in previous life, when I worked at the Getty, along with Annabel and Alison, I was one of the champions for Arches in use at the Getty across the different parts of the organization. I'm also co-chair of the Linked Art Standards Committee, which is a profile of CRM that we try to champion as part of the Arches modeling practices and part of the working group for trying to come to best ways to do things.
Yep. Thank you, Rob. Neil?
Yeah, I have been working with Arches since version 3 with my colleague Angela Labrador for Coherent Associates, and we've done several instances both in the United States and the Caribbean. And my particular interest is community engagement and user-generated content of significant places, and trying to come up with models that not only are easier for, let's say, the general public to work with and appropriate for this idea of community-driven significance. But I'm also really interested in modeling for intangible heritage of various kinds. So that's me.
Great, thank you. Maggie?
Hi, I'm Maggie Smith. I feel like it's very fitting that I go after Neil. We're also interested in the community engagement side as well as intangible cultural heritage. I work for the city and county of San Francisco in California and have been building out our Arches instance for the San Francisco Citywide Cultural Resources Survey. And we've dabbled a little bit in kind of everything with Arches, and I'm looking forward to learning more from all of you and sharing what we have. So thanks, Annabel, for creating this.
Absolutely. Jana?
Hello, so I'm Jana. I work for Flax and Teal, so the company John mentioned that we're working for, actually. I am coming from perspective of more of a product owner, I suppose, and for HED we're trying to stretch and bend and do anything we can with Arches to fit their purposes and what they need to do with it. So I'm more interested in what all can be done and what all can be achieved and how can we truly customize the instance for them.
Great, thank you. Bruno?
Hi, greetings from Italy. I collaborate with the NYU excavation at Ameida in Egypt, and we are planning to migrate our current database to Arches. We just start modeling, so I'm here to learn as much as I can, watching other people doing.
Great. Thank you. Mei, wow, I'm surprised to see you here. Thank you for attending.
Well, greetings from New Zealand. Yep, and yes, it is early in the morning, but I'm particularly interested in this group. So I work with the Auckland Council, and we've just recently gone live internally with our Arches instance. So I'm the lead heritage team member that's been involved in that. So yeah, building the models for our implementation, and we've got more modeling to do. So I'm, I guess, interested just to yeah, learn more about it and just double check in that we're on the right track, I guess is the way of putting it. And yeah, thanks for starting the group.
You're welcome. Thanks for attending even at very late in the evening. Sarah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Delgadillo, and I'm joining you all from an early morning in Los Angeles as well. Not so early as New Zealand, though. And I'm the data coordinator for Historic Places LA, and we were fortunate to receive assistance in setting up our resource models. However, as we grow our inventory and the need to include new resource models, or perhaps evolve our existing resource models, there is a great need in our office to get a full understanding and fully wrap our heads around what may be needed, and as we grow. So that's why I'm here, and I'm hoping to learn from all of you guys. Thank you.
Hey, great. Anyone else before I move forward?
Hi, I'll just say very quickly, my name is Tris. I work with Open Tech Strategies. We're an Arches service provider, and as such, my background is much more on the back end and server support side. But I thought attending this meeting would be very valuable as I learn more about ontologies, resource modeling, and the like. So thanks so much for having this meeting.
Welcome. Thank you. All right, great. So I'm going to move on with our agenda and share my screen again. And so, so to talk about the user group, I'm going to go ahead and propose that this group meets quarterly. So that would put our next meeting at October 8th or abouts. And we can talk if I know this is the time that we could find that could work for most people, may notwithstanding. And but we can also have more discussion about that via the Arches user group, via the Arches community forum. And I wanted to just call out some links here, and I am also dropping these in the chat. If you would like to be on the email list for this user group, for the modeling user group, please fill out this form. It's a Google form, and if you fill out this form, we'll send you a meeting invite so that you can make sure that this is on that the next meeting is on your calendar, and any subsequent meetings are on the calendar. And also, if there are any relevant modeling updates that you might want to be apprised of, you can join that email list. And there's also an option within that Google form to also opt into the larger Arches announcement list. So there's that link that's in the chat as well. There is a web page for this modeling user group, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then also, many of you might have seen the announcement for the user group on the Arches community forum. And we've created a tag for that, which is modeling user group. So if you want to continue the discussions that we're having today, I would urge you to continue it on the forum, and so that it's not just during the meetings that we actually have the conversation, that we can have the conversation on the forum as well. So that's that's just some admin. And with that, I'm going to get started with our presentations since we've got a couple. And all right, and I'm going to go ahead and start off with the first presentation that I'll be presenting, and that is how to get started with resource modeling in Arches. So this is going to be the introduction, very basic presentation on how to get started with resource modeling in Arches. And yeah, and hopefully I can help to demystify it for those who are just starting out. Now, I will say this, as a data management platform, as you know, as someone who works with Arches and it being a data management platform, it's understandable that how do I get my data into Arches, it's a question I always hear. I hear it all the time. And you know, if you've decided to use Arches because of all of the features and are ready to take how you interact with your cultural heritage data to the next level, then it's understandable that you want to be able to either bulk import or start entering data via the user interface right away once you install the Arches software. After all, when you install a program like Excel, though most of us have this pre-installed for work, you can start entering your data right away. But actually, that's not true. When you create a new worksheet in Excel, for example, and start entering data, consciously or not, you are actually making decisions about how you want to structure your data before you start entering your actual data. For example, here's a blank Excel worksheet. And usually when you start entering data, you decide what the columns and rows mean. Is the first column going to be where you enter a record number, or is it where you're going to be entering names? Does each row represent a person or a historic building or something else? And to draw an analogy, the decisions with how you organize your data in Excel or anything or any other program can be the difference between this junk drawer on the left and this very, very organized spice drawer on the right. With the junk drawer, and I know we all have a version of this, I certainly do, there's no thought given to what the purpose or organization of this drawer is. And it makes it hard to know what's in there. And for me, it ends up being a bit of a black hole where things are no longer useful because I don't know that they're in there. Now, with the organized spice drawer, someone made a decision that this drawer is only going to be used for spices. And they went even further by organizing the spices and making sure that when you open this drawer, you are going to be able to find tarragon because it will be visible and it will be labeled as such. And you can go even further and put a label with when you last refilled the spice so that you know how old that spice is, if that's a concern. Now, getting back to my point is that regardless of what program you use to store your data, you are always making decisions about how you organize that data, and how well you organize that data is key to how useful it ends up being to you. And it's no different in Arches. We give you the tools for enhanced data management, but ultimately its usefulness has a lot to do with how the data is organized. So before you can enter data, Arches requires you to define where the data is going and how it should be used. So with Arches, you can't enter the data until you define how it's organized. Arches essentially requires that you set up the equivalent of this, the very organized spice drawer, so that it knows where to put your data. And this is the essence of what data modeling or resource modeling is. It's making decisions about what data you include in your system and how that data is organized. It's a process that one would undertake when designing any system or database to define the organization and the structure of the data, given any program or project goals or use cases. It's usually based on existing or legacy data or data that has yet to be created. And the process can involve the integration of data standards or existing ontologies. In fact, we would suggest it. And it also determines what the relationships are between different data and sets of data. So the title of this presentation is How to Get Started with This Process, specifically resource modeling in Arches. And I'm going to give you a really broad overview of that, but also let you know what's on the way in regards to more information and training around Arches resource modeling. So what is the first step? And I'd say that the first step to data modeling is really to know and define your data and what you are trying to achieve with your Arches implementation, and then document it. You can install Arches first, but installing Arches won't tell you how to organize your data. And even if you are planning on hiring a service provider or getting your IT department to help you to configure Arches during the resource modeling step, the person or the people who understand the data best and what needs to be accomplished are usually the people who are going to be using it. So the people who are going to be using it day to day. And so, so really they should be involved. And we've recognized this, which is why starting with Arches version 4, we decided to create the Arches Designer, so that once Arches is installed by the IT folks, the experts in the domain or field, whether it be cultural heritage or some other field, can use this interface tool with no experience in coding to make the decisions about how the data is modeled. So again, this first step is for someone who understands the data and purpose for an Arches implementation to be involved, either by creating a methodology for someone else to follow and execute using Arches Designer, or for them to be hands-on using Arches Designer to edit existing Arches resource models or create new ones. I will say this also saves time because you're not going back and forth with data modeling changes between you and your service provider or IT department. The person who knows the data best can make the decisions. Now, also, Arches Designer, not only, in addition to creating resource model, Arches Designer also automatically generates the data entry forms, and it sets permissions and access to the data based on the resource models that are created there. So the Arches Designer is a very powerful tool, and and for the most part, working with the Arches Designer happens at the beginning of an Arches implementation. It's not generally happening in the can, especially if you're making changes to how you're using Arches, but generally it happens at the very beginning. Okay. And in regards to that process, I alluded to this. Generally, you want to know what your project requirements, your program requirements are first, and then you can, and then you're evaluating Arches based on your program requirements. You install the software, and then you can configure Arches, including defining the database, and then you can upload, bulk upload, or enter data via the interface. So these are the general overall steps with implementing Arches. And when you get to this step here at the configuration portion and defining the database, this is really the step where the resource modeling is involved. And there are generally two options. Number one, start from scratch and define your Arches resource models using the Arches Designer based on your requirements. And the second option is leverage the work of other Arches implementations and use their resource models as a starting point at the very least. I'll talk about a little bit more about these options, but I will say that even if you decide to create your Arches resource models from scratch, you should study the modeling work that others have done to help inform that. So starting from scratch. So if after surveying the modeling work of other Arches community members, you decide that your use case is too different, or maybe you just like modeling and you want to model it yourself, you can start from scratch to create new resource models based on your requirements. In this case, after defining your methodology and installing Arches, you would work with the Arches Designer again to create those models. And I'm not going to go into the Arches using the nuts and bolts of using Arches Designer today, because I'm sure we'll have a presentation on that in the future. And generally, most people can intuit how to use it at a very basic level. But what I will talk about when it comes to Arches resource modeling, or I'll touch upon it very briefly because George will be talking about this more, is what I think a lot of people are kind of intimidated by when they think of modeling in Arches, which is the CIDOC CRM. This is something that I think gets alluded to and is very intimidating. Look at that, it's very intimidating. But really, I'll just to quickly demystify it before George goes into this more deeply. When you start creating an Arches resource model from scratch, one of the first options you have is whether or not to use an ontology as the basis for your resource modeling. Now, in this case, you'll see here that the linked art modeling pattern version of the CIDOC CRM is selected, and you also have the option to use no ontology. We don't suggest that unless it really keys into your use case. And but for cultural heritage, we would suggest using an ontology like the CIDOC CRM. But once you've made this decision for a particular resource model, you can't change it without creating a new resource model. But really, what do I mean by ontology? What is it, and why is it an important component of your resource model? Well, an ontology is essentially an underlying organizing principle for your data structure. And it's key to this is that it's well documented, machine readable, and it's standardized. Now, as a project, we landed on the CIDOC Conceptual Reference Model, or CRM, as the default ontology for Arches. And we did this initially because we wanted to make sure that the data that was managed by an Arches implementation, particularly Arches implementations for cultural heritage, were that the data were interoperable and portable and would survive for years to come, regardless of what technological advancements came. Nowadays, we represent our reasoning as adhering to the FAIR principles, ensuring that data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And using an ontology such as the CIDOC CRM or different serializations or versions of the CIDOC CRM helps in this goal. George is going to cover this more deeply, but I'll just say that it is an ISO standard. And the thing about it is that it's not, the CIDOC CRM or any ontology generally is not replacing your own methodology. You can think of it as, that you would create your own methodology, and that it's not a replacement for that, but rather an additional layer of data definition that is machine readable and portable. A lot of this stuff I know that George is going to talk about, so I'll continue, but just know that that the CIDOC CRM is a standard that has been around for a while and is being used a lot in the cultural heritage field. Now, the thing about the CIDOC CRM, again, like I said, it's very intimidating if you are someone who's just trying to model your data in Arches and bring it over from, say, even an Excel spreadsheet. And so another option is to leverage the work of the community who have already done this work, who have already worked with the CIDOC CRM and have modeled their data according to whatever standards. And so the second option is not to start from scratch. It's to use community generated resource models as the basis, either the starting point or just using it entirely for your resource models. Now, for an example of this is the Arches for HERs project or package. So HER standing for Historic Environment Records. And this is the customization of Arches that can be used for any organization that wants to record archaeological and historic place inventory data according to UK heritage data standards. It is based on the Midas Heritage Standard for England, and it is already mapped to the CIDOC CRM. And so any historic environment record in England or the UK broadly can take these models as their starting point. In fact, you don't even have to be part of the UK to find these useful. Maney is on this call, and we did a presentation with them in Auckland, Auckland Council Heritage. And I know that they started their modeling process by looking at the Arches for HER's package to see what they could use and what they couldn't before arriving at their own models. And to facilitate the sharing of resource models between different organizations that are implementing Arches, we are in the process of relaunching the Arches package library, which will be a listing of community submitted Arches projects and packages, with the requirements for inclusion in the Arches package library being that the package must load in the Arches version that the submitter specifies and that we can verify the metadata that's submitted. Currently, the Arches Resource Model Working Group is currently testing the peer review process for providing notes on the data modeling in each package to aid community members in deciding what packages to use. So here's the link for the package library and the packages that are there now, and we'll be adding more with some peer review in the next few months. And if you sign up for the email list, we'll definitely let you know when. We'll give you a preview to let you know when things like this are relaunched or online. And I mentioned the Arches Resource Model Working Group. We have a couple members in here today as part of this group. So George Bruseker is the chair of the Arches Resource Model Working Group currently, and I am the vice chair. And also other members here in this group are Dennis Witheridge and Rob Sanderson. And essentially what this group is, the working group is, it's a group of community members, and Arches community members with expertise in data modeling, with the aim of generating and managing the package library, the modeling documentation, and helping to facilitate modeling discussion in the Arches community, aka this group. So this is definitely an element of what the Arches Resource Model Working Group is looking to do, is facilitating these kinds of discussions. So here's a link to some documentation on modeling, and this also supplements the modeling documentation that is in the official documentation for Arches broadly. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the Arches Community Forum, which I would like to make sure that the conversation about modeling gets continued, and we do have a tag, that's Modeling User Group. So if you have a modeling question, I would ask that you tag it with Modeling User Groups so that we can address it during these meetings, and also vice versa. If we have modeling discussion during these meetings that it would be helpful to have on the forum, I will also post it on the forum with a summary and link to the recording of this meeting. So, and then, yeah. Let's see, there's the tag, Modeling User Group. And right now there are only 2. The notice is about this meeting. All right, and this is just a screenshot of the web page for this modeling user group. Well, I'll add more information here, including when the recording is available. I'll let you all, everyone who's on the email list, know, and it'll be posted here as well. All right, and that's a very brief overview of getting started with modeling in Arches. I'm going to stop sharing, and we can go. I'll hold the questions until George's presentation is over. And so, yes, so George.
Thanks, Annabelle. I'll share my screen. So that was an incredibly eloquent and useful introduction to data modeling and the problems that somebody faces, and I'm glad it's recorded, as I will use it again with others. So my name is George Bruseker. I am, as Annabel mentioned, chair of the Arches Resource Modeling Working Group. I'm also a co-chair of the CIDOC CRM Special Interest Group, which is responsible for developing and maintaining the CIDOC CRM ontology. And so the focus of my brief intervention is just going to be talking about ontologies themselves, why we have them, why they're recommended in Arches for cultural heritage, and then giving some thoughts towards how to approach taking them up for the data modeling task. So stepping back, why a formal ontology? And I think this really relates to the fact that Arches isn't just a software, but a program that sort of started with, that's been initiated by Getty Conservation Institute together with the World Monuments Fund. And the core mission there is the conservation of cultural heritage writ large. And so then if you're going to get into the work of building an application that can support cultural heritage specialists, documenting the work that they're doing in conserving cultural heritage, then you have to look towards how can you support that documentation process. It's foundational to doing conservational work that you document what you do and you build the sort of historical record of knowledge around the objects of cultural heritage import. Once you open up that problem, that information space, you see that obviously the objects of cultural heritage investigation and care are innumerable. The disciplines and techniques that deal with them are many and have very different information requirements and different approaches to documenting and putting information together. And then already within this space, there are a number of standards that are good standards that can help a documentation process, etc. But they are themselves multiple and inconsistent between themselves. So how are you going to build a sort of Swiss Army knife of a information management platform for cultural heritage that's going to have the possibility of meeting all those community requirements? And so the answer to that is an ontology, which is a meta standard. So we've already introduced the terms formal ontology a couple times, Annabel has already introduced the basic idea, but I'll just re-emphasize it. So formal ontologies, I think, are nicely captured by the short quote of Guarino: an ontology is an explicit partial account of a conceptualization. That's a fancy way of saying in a domain of interest like cultural heritage, can you create an abstraction that would allow you to describe in an information system in a way that speaks to everybody in that domain the things that you document and the kinds of information that you want to retrieve about them. So rather than just having, this is my Excel, this is my database that follows scheme X, we're going to do an explicit project of defining the broad level of things that people talk about in our domain, and then be able to use that to express that data regardless of what system we're in. So as Annabel said, that thing should be human readable and machine calculable. And it's expressed in terms of, it describes information about the world that we talk about in terms of instances, that's real things in the world. Classes, those are ways of categorizing the real kinds of things that we talk about, and relations are the kinds of things that we want to be able to say about them. And this is supposed to be a lingua franca for allowing us to join up very disparate, seemingly disparate data sets that are in potentially different data structures and re-express them in a common language. And so in this little graph, I've just quickly given a mini ontology. This is a diagram from formal logic class from when I was a student of Tarski's world, and it has a very simple world. There's a board, it has squares, then there are geometric objects. You could represent that. My apologies. You could represent the things in this world in an information system through some identifiers. There's object B, A, D, C, and the ontology is supposed to give you a set of classes and relations that allows you to talk about those instances. So A is a cube, B is a cube, and then you could ask things like, how many things are cubes, or how many things are geometric shapes, and how does that, on what square does cube X sit, and so on. So that at a very abstract level, but more concretely towards the work of cultural heritage specialists, a lot of work has gone on since the mid-90s on developing a standard on formal ontology for cultural heritage. That's called the CIDOC CRM. CIDOC is the International Council of Documentation. CRM stands for Conceptual Reference Model. And basically, this ontology is the result of studying many, many different museum, archive, and library databases and abstracting the kinds of information that people are recording, and then creating this overarching schema that allows you to redescribe any of these information systems in one consistent schema. This group is an active group. We meet twice a year. We work on maintaining the ontology, getting new information in, extending it, trying to make it closer to what people look at in contemporary research. And what you see on the right-hand side with these colored boxes and arrows is a sort of high-level description of the CIDOC CRM model, which has 100 classes and 180 relations. But the core idea behind it is it's an event-centric model. So when we're dealing with cultural heritage, we're not we often document objects, but actually what we're interested in doing is understanding the history of an object, whether it be, you know, its production or its conservation or its trade and provenance, et cetera, et cetera. And so it has a high level representation that allows you to then get down into the details for particular areas of research. And so what that has been, what it aims to do is that in the real world, you know, we're all working on describing actual things, cultural heritage objects that are objects of care, objects of conservation and concern and interest and argumentation, et cetera. And typically, we work in systems like Ex Libris for libraries, Archive Space for archives, TMS for museums, and all of those things talk about the same object, but they're all different information spaces that have their own schema, and so they don't talk to each other, and they don't give us an overall world picture of what's going on with this real object. So CIDOC CRM is originally designed to allow you to re-express the information that's in these systems in order to create a common graph that would give you all the information from system A, B, and C that I might want to know about, say, the irises. Arches is innovative in that it allows you to create born semantic data. Semantic data is the term I use for actual data following the formal ontology. It has meaning semantic. And so Arches is something that implements from the start the ontology, which is CIDOC CRM in our conversation. It's actually ontology agnostic. So if you thought better and thought you'd like to use RICO for archives or some other thing, this is possible. It doesn't restrict you to one ontology. It's an open system. That's a great benefit. And so how it does that has already been introduced by Annabel, so I can go over it quickly. But basically, when you initiate the system, you make a choice on which ontology you want to boot into it. You can add extensions. You can choose an ontology from a different domain. And then this designer is really a fantastic tool that allows you to take the classes and properties from that ontology and use them to build the data structure to really build that picture of the information space that you're describing in whatever the topic it is that you're doing research or management on. Another feature that Annabel didn't point out heavily is that these models, I mean, implicitly, but each Arches instance builds a library of data models and also data branches, which are like patterns for doing things consistently. So how do we represent a name? How do we represent an event? How do we represent these things? You can kind of solve that problem once or borrow somebody's solution, and then you can take those small patterns and use them to build a model up from existing solutions. And that's pretty amazing because it once you are on the path of using the ontology, then it makes it really efficient to build consistent and well-structured models. So I think my remit was to talk about why, you know, the selection of making it really possible to implement ontologies for doing data modeling in Arches. And so this would be the core slide. Having an ontology means that you can fit the schema to your data rather than fitting your data to the schema. That is to say, you're in control of the data modeling, you're in control of what your data finally says. And that's an amazing thing. If you've struggled with the closed software, you know what I mean? CIDOC CRM or any other ontology also helps you think through good data modeling, going back to what Annabel said at the start about what are these decisions about how I organize. In the end, it allows you to clearly express just exactly what your information is about. And then via using the ontology, it means that if you use it consistently together with other projects, etc., that you're creating a long-term data interoperability because you're all singing from the same hymn sheet. That was one of my alternative pictures for this slide. And so you'll be able to dump this data into larger data structures and learn more about the world without having to do that much more work. And because the data expresses itself, the ontology is encoded in with the data. It creates data sustainability because Arches can disappear tomorrow. And if you've dumped your data out, then it will be self-describing. So you're not in that system lock-in situation. So it really puts the data owner in control of what they say. And then this is just a quick callback to the other slide to say that, and the other vision that you can definitely imagine not too far down the line is that now, instead of having these data silos of this system, that system, that system, that system, and then you have to push up to some other level and push down, as there are more Arches instances, creating more compatible data, then you open the door towards how can I make my data available? I'm an expert in this. I'm building this, I'm building thesauri, and I have a great thesaurus for you. Maybe you can adopt that. You don't have to do that work, and that's another part of the dream of semantic data, interoperable, and we can all benefit from each other's knowledge and create a ever more rich knowledge network rather than our present soup of misinformation. So those are all the benefits, and I'm 2 minutes over time. So I'm just going to come to the point, I think, of this group is that all ontologies are great, but they are something that you have to learn. And most people have not had a formal education in using an ontology or semantic data. And so that's the rubbing point of how to actually get all these benefits. And I think Annabel has already laid out better the course of what how this group can function to create a sort of horizontal discussion between people. I'll just point out that you can find information about how to use CIDOC CRM on the CIDOC CRM website. Could always be improved, but it's there. Rob, who is here, is co-chair of this Linked Art group, which is actually a group that looks at trying to go from the abstraction of CIDOC CRM to saying, that's great, how are we going to use this particularly as a community? And so they've created and documented and made available reusable patterns as good advice on how to make a well-structured semantic data set for people or names or places, etc. I also work in another project that's a sister project of linked art that looks at how to make extensions of linked art to deal with different topics. So what about historical information about place names or something like that? Not a core topic of linked art, but something interesting. You want a standard pattern. That's what the semantic reference data modeling is about. And then there's all the work that Annabel has already introduced about the Arches Resource Modeling Working Group and getting down to the real core of this meeting. This group hopefully will be a place where ground up conversations can happen and knowledge can be exchanged. Thank you. Sorry for going over time.
No, thank you, George. I think we can start if there are any. We have about before end of time. We have looks like 6 minutes. So if there is any, if you have any questions regarding what I presented or with what George presented, or actually any other comments having to do with modeling or questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you or start talking to. Any questions? We've given you so much knowledge that you're just sitting with it for a little bit. Well, I'm going to let you all think about if you have any questions, but I'm going to start to wrap up the meeting. But feel free, if anything pops in your mind, to let us know. Or also, if something later on, if you have a question later on, again, please post on the Arches Community Forum using the hashtag or using that tag modeling user group. So yes, George, you have a question?
Just an idea about questions. If we don't do questions now, but things haven't been fundamentally resolved, you're still like formal ontologies, what is that? Or how do you make that, initial connection or whatever, then, that part of the forum has been started up, so we could make it lively and carry on the conversation there.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, like I said, the proposal, what I'm proposing is that this user group meets quarterly. So that gives me and others time to create presentations for the group. But that can change depending on how lively the conversations are on the community forum, what you ask for, what's needed really. And also too, I want to say that this isn't George mentioned this horizontal communication. It's not just me or others presenting information. We're all sharing information. So if you would like to present, for example, how you've modeled your data as kind of as a discussion point and for this group, or just even if you want feedback, that's another reason for maybe presenting what your current modeling or how you've modeled your data. Please let us know in the community forum. Before every meeting, I will definitely be asking this group or putting out on the forum whether or not anyone else wants to present something. And I think in the sign-up list, in the email sign-up list, I also added that there so that you'll see that they'll give you some options. But I've also included the modeling topics here, so that I've also included the modeling topics that I've proposed already, and you can add additional modeling topics that you might want some presentations on or discussions on. So please definitely take a look at that and submit there, or you can also do that via the forum, either way. So, and with that, I'm going to ask if there are any other questions. I know that this is really the beginning, and we really hope that this group is going to be useful for everyone. Great. Well, we're going to wrap up very tidily then. And so I'll say here that tentatively the date for the next meeting will be October 8th. So that's the next quarter. And in regards to the topics, if you really think that a particular, oh yes, Bruno.
Hi, just a stupid question maybe.
Hmm?
I'm curious about how Arches implements the F of fair data, so the findable part of fair data.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a
Yeah.
specific API to do that, or other than having a look at the resource manager?
I see. So apart from the interface, is that what you're asking? Is apart from the
I mean,
search tools?
to show my my data model to the rest of the world. I mean, what are the options? I mean, are they really findable?
Oh, I see. I see. I see what you're.
At this point, or
I see what you're saying. So, so if you have an Arches implementation, you're asking how open is that to other search engines? Is that what you're asking?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, let's see. So, I can't off the top of my head. I can't answer that off the top of my head, but I can get you an answer, and I can make sure that that's on the community forum. Is that okay?
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's an important question, because oftentimes we have these individual sites and sometimes the data isn't exposed to search engines. And so we can talk about that. George, yes?
Just to say, yeah, I don't have that technical answer either, but about I think there's two levels. There's the data and there's the data models.
Yeah.
And as far as the data models go, that's kind of what Annabel alluded to with the refresh of the repository idea, is that because this is intensive work and it's difficult and it's useful to reuse knowledge, the idea is we want to make those very findable. So as we build up this process, we'll make all these data models and packages available, and that makes them findable, which will eventually make the data within them understandable.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But I'll definitely post that question on the forum and make sure that we all discuss that there. Any other questions? Again, feel free to post any follow-up questions on the forum using the tag. And I think with that, I want to thank you all for attending this first meeting. I'm really excited to get this conversation going. And yes, thank you all. And thank you, George, to George for, yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.